Welcome to Home Business TV. Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Henderson. Redneck Resilience. The phrase drives home the importance of building resilience in these uncertain times in whatever business you operate. Today's podcast guest, James Harold Webb, the author of the book, Redneck Resilience, will talk about the critical issue of your business's resilience to better navigate uncertain times. James Harold Webb, how are you doing today?
Richard, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Where are you dialing? Where are you dialing in from?
We're coming from Frisco, Texas, just north of Dallas, and in my home library.
So you said you're doing some remodeling or on your home office?
I mentioned earlier, it's the first time I'm shutting down my business office, so to speak, and kind of work out of home from this point forward. And it'll be the first time I've not had an office in 43 years. So I'm kind of a little anxious
Wait a minute,
about it.
you have an office, a home office. You're a home-based entrepreneur
Yes,
on the Home
true.
Business Podcast.
That is true.
Well, we're glad to welcome aboard, as we would say in the Navy. In addition to being the author of Redneck Resilience, A Country Boy's Journey to Prosperity, James Harold Webb has a great entrepreneur success story across many different businesses, including healthcare outpatient services, extensive franchising businesses, and even in the fitness industry. So hope he'll weave some interesting things from his background as we talk today. You know, James Robett, if you can please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the lucky country boy from Mississippi who pretty much grew up dirt poor and been on my own since about 16. Went to the local junior college, became an X-ray technician. Thought that's what I'd do for a living, and X-ray tech led me into the business side of the world. Moved to Texas, youngest director of radiologists in the United States at the time at 23, and this is way before the internet, so I went back to school at night. Got my master's degree and thought I was going to be a hospital administrator. And then boom, life throws you these fun curveballs. And this thing called MRI was invented. And I was one of the first people in that industry and worked my way up the corporate ladder of several companies. And then in about 1996, decided to take that leap and become an entrepreneur. And I did my first company international. Took MRI and CAT scanning and heart catheterizations to Latin America and the Caribbean. Got great, crazy stories. Probably the only guy you'll meet held at gunpoint by the Sandinistas. Probably the only guy you'll meet almost kidnapped by the Guatemala rebels. Thank you, doctor, for talking them out of it. Just a lot of crazy stories, but it was a fun adventure bringing healthcare to these much needed markets. Exited that company in around 2000.
Well, I kind of like you have a typical story here a lot where you take some life experiences you have or things you've learned in business, and then you transition that into your own business and become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. I had some really good mentors, which is hugely important in life, is to have those people that influence you, and very supportive mentors that not only taught me business, but also were my first financial backers. And that was really critical to getting started as a young man.
Having financial resources. Mentors, the older I get, the more important I think mentors are. Did you seek out mentors, or did mentors kind of come to you and see what you were doing and offer their help?
I think it was really more of they saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself at the time, and they nurtured me on. And my very first one was I'm sitting at my desk at the hospital, and the guy walks in and says, "I want to hire you to run an MRI company." And I'm like, "Get away. I'm going to be a hospital administrator." And I do an interview at 130 miles an hour in his Datsun 240ZX. And yep, flip from the medical side to the business side of medicine. Quite scary.
There are advantages to being an entrepreneur. Well, let's dive into a little bit more. A good place to start is with your book. What was your inspiration for writing Redneck Resilience? It does have kind of a catchy title.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people always said, "Hey, you need to write a book. Hey, you need to write a book." And one day I just said, I've learned so much in life and had some really fun stories and crazy stories and, a decent amount of success. So it was really just kind of a natural thing to want to share what I had done with others.
Did you Like some people like knuckle down and they work on the book until they get it done. Others kind of have it in the back of their mind and they jot notes down and it eventually comes together. Were you more of a suddenly dive into it and get it done, or did you write the book over time?
Yeah, so I had a combination of things. I had someone help me because I really didn't know how to do this. And we had a session where we would work together for roughly 90 minutes to an hour or an hour and a half a month. And he would write things down. I would write things down. We'd collaborate. And once we had a chapter done, we'd set it on the shelf and go to the next chapter. And I would make notes and he would make notes and we'd go back and forth. And what really I love about the book a lot is that people say it sounds like me talking. So, I had really good help with that. And it portrays my message the way kind of I wanted to deliver it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a really good syntax and the way you deliver, and they always say then to write the way you speak. And I guess if you can do that, you'll have a winning combination.
Yeah, a few four-letter words occasionally, but yeah, it was fun to do, and it just talks like a country boy telling his story.
That's all about being authentic. I think that's one thing people look at when they do read a book. I think the authenticity is always in the background. So the more authentic you can be, the
Absolutely.
better. Well,
Yeah.
like you've also got a good message about, the uncertain times and navigating, building resilience, tying in with your book, like looking at the challenge to business owners today with uncertain times. You stress to navigate these times with, good contingency plans and multiple strategies. Anything you can add on that?
Yeah, I have a saying I use, which is I hope for the upside, but I always plan for the downside. And I think that's critical when you start your company is look out there and see what things you have to navigate and plan for those ahead of time. A lot of times there's things we don't always expect and we have to deal with on the moment, but there's a lot of things we can look at and go, okay, what if this happens? How will I handle that? And I did a lot of that through my career of just being ready and having those contingency plans in place to and I had to use them many times. So yeah, I'm a big believer in hope for the upside, but plan for the downside.
Yeah, I come out of a military background, and I would think you're from a military background also with the way you talk about planning. And the
Yeah,
key thing you brought out is always think about every contingency and at least have some kind of an idea of what you're going to do.
it's really important to do that. And then the other sort of part of that message was I looked at what other people I worked with and what other industries I worked with, and could I remove some of those obstacles by doing it myself? So as an example, we had to service MRI equipment with the big manufacturers, and they charged you, $150,000 a year per machine. And we said, let's just do it ourselves. So we hired our own engineers and we built our own service company. And then we not only serviced our own equipment, but then we expanded that and turned it into a revenue stream
Now that's a
by
big
servicing
risk.
others.
That was a big risk you took to to develop it on your own.
It was a risk, but again, we had the ability to do it step by step by step. And so, we didn't jump out and do 15 machines at one time. We took on one, said, this is ours. Let's learn, let's figure this out. We had to hire the right people. And it worked out okay in that time. This is back in the, early 2000s.
You know, James, is there any other advice you can give about building resilience in times of uncertainty, to better navigate the times? You've got a
Yeah,
wealth of
I
information.
think that what I've sort of learned, particularly with some of the newer generations, is work ethic. And for me, you know, I always said work harder than anybody else. When it was time to go home, make two more phone calls. When it's time to send your employees home, send them home, stay so they can see you there, see you working, have that leadership style. And that was always really important to me to then be prepared for the bad times and just outwork everybody. That was always my goal.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like, your work ethic and just sticking with it. You know, you also, stress to be optimistic as part of a coping strategy. How do you think an entrepreneur's mindset, their mindset can then help them navigate uncertainty and build more resilience in their business?
Yeah, a lot of that's confidence in yourself, knowing that, hey, I can do this and knowing that I'm going to be able to get over these hurdles. So and I've done 18 companies and exited 8 of them for nice paydays, and it's always been, internally going, I'm going to do this. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. And it's also having the understanding that there's also another life out there called your family life. And I always had specific things I did with my children, and carved out those little time frames and carved out times for my wife. And it just helped make the journeys and the conflicts a little bit easier, having that personal time set aside. So
So
that's always been
maybe
important to
something
me.
I'm gathering here is that part of that mindset, along with, stick to it and, have that resilience in what you want to do. But it sounds like keeping balance has been important to you also, which is what a lot of entrepreneurs can end up falling into, that trap of, 24-hour work days. And the next thing you know, they don't remember what their kids look like. And so
Yeah.
you,
I've had that discussion with a lot of people. It's hard to maintain a work-life balance. It really is hard. And so for me, for example, with my children, I coached their sports. So I did 17 seasons of something, whether it was soccer or t-ball or whatever it was. And that was my time with my kids. Now I would do the practices, I would do the games, come home, kiss them, and go back to work. With the wife, it was Saturday night date night. It was not something we didn't do. It was every single Saturday night. Had to be that little time together, Friday night dinner at
what
the
happens if
house.
you miss that Saturday?
I'd be in trouble, first of all, probably, but second of all, it just wasn't an option.
Right.
It was paramount to doing that. But she also was very supportive, and I've also found that to be critical in business, having that supportive partner that understands that I'm going to be working 12 hours a day. We're going to benefit from this in 10 years, but I need your support now. And I had it. So it was really great.
One thing I'm hearing is that, we all have the same amount of time, but if you don't waste time, and, come back and relax and just sit on the couch, but you come back and relax with a plan to hang out with the kids or go with date night, to, that, quality of how you're spending the time is important. And I think a lot of people just, waste time without assigning a priority to it, whether they're going to work, relax, or do something with their family. So it sounds like having, the quality of time and making the most of it helps with that balance also.
Again, it was a very formal process for me. This was the time, cell phone off or cell phone on hold. And this was the time to be with the family. But again, having an understanding spouse and children that knew, okay, they got dad now, husband now, but in 2 hours from now, I'm back to work.
Yeah, it's a
And it's,
lot
it's really
tougher
drawing
now though
lines.
with that little 3-inch mini computer in your pocket and the distraction of your phone, and how if you don't think about it, you're pulled right back into work while you're hanging out with your kids or out on date night.
Yeah, that phone has changed the entire workforce. I mean, it
Yep.
is it's exactly. I bet I spend hours on that thing a day, and I just have to sometimes just set it aside and have the family time, and then come back and answer the 20 texts I got while I was away.
Right. Yeah, that's why it just keeps it going 24 hours a day. But, you just got to say you don't have to answer the phone. That message will still be there.
It will. But
Um,
we've had a fun journey. We just to expand a little bit more on what we did. We built the largest medical imaging company in Texas and exited that in 2017, which was really cool. We built the largest pain management practice in Texas and
mhm.
exited that. And then we went into the franchise world, which you referenced earlier. And that's a whole different world that I had to learn and navigate through, and had a very successful run with that. And now we've got 2 more franchise companies going now.
Yeah, I saw that you're currently franchising now and going into a couple other things.
Yeah, we're doing a female product, weight loss product franchise, and then we got into an animal health, wealth, and grooming franchise, and we're able to secure some pretty decent rights. We have most of Dallas with the dog grooming company, and as you go along and learn this process, you can negotiate certain things and secure territories and have them on hold, and it's been fun
Mhm.
process learning the franchise world.
Would you say it's safe to say that, every business that you've gone into is somehow built off of something you've done in the past? where it's either a related industry or a competency that you learned that you were able to apply and be successful in the next business you started?
It was in the healthcare side. And then, when I made that jump into the franchise world, it was a little bit of a jump because whether you like it or not, as a franchisee, you have a boss called the franchisor. And I
Right.
had not had many bosses. So I had to sort of get used to that and understand and develop those relationships. And we did. We had great relationships with our quote unquote boss. And again, in the franchise world, a lot of your success is not just what you do, but it's what corporate does.
Right.
So that's a critical point right there.
So, I mean, you do sound like kind of, an independent guy and do it your own way, so getting into franchising, it was a little bit, you had to culturally adapt when you first got into it. But then once got into the mindset of how the franchisor did things, were you pretty comfortable with it and enjoyed how it went?
I was. I mean, we did Orange 3 Fitness as the franchise we got involved in 2013. So at the time, they had about 90 studios around the country, and we secured the rights to Dallas Fort Worth. And uh, again, I can remember the first gym and struggling with getting directions, and I couldn't open until we had so many members, and I just
Oh,
wasn't used to that. But once we got used to that, and once we developed the relationship, which by the way, relationships are critical, it was easy to do. And we just follow the guidelines.
yeah. I think a franchisor is looking for good common sense, good business sense, and not necessarily having experience in the industry that that you're going into, but that you have those competencies to make a business successful.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, most of the franchise people I know, I was literally on the phone a few minutes ago with a guy getting into the ultra light franchise business where they have these spas, and we were talking through how to set it up and going through it. And he had been in the restaurant business prior to that. So, yeah, I think franchisors are looking for business people, not
Right.
necessarily someone that knows their product.
Well, a discussion like this, we always got to talk about money and finances. Are there any steps you can recommend or things to do that will, along with your money and your finances, help reduce uh, business uncertainty and, improve success? I imagine you've had some challenges financially. Sometimes it's been, tough with cash flow in businesses. Any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that cash flow in businesses is sometimes the killing point or the point that you have to sort of solve. I'm a big believer in OPM, other people's money. So I either have investors or I have banks. If you spend enough time, you become asset proof, which I am. And so my signature is on every bank loan I do, and I've never bailed on a bank loan ever. But I'm asset protected, so all my stuff is all estates free, so I can borrow money and feel comfortable knowing that if something crazy happened, the bank will get me, they won't get my money. And so I think learning how to do some of those things is just stuff, as I always say, they didn't teach me that at Jones County Junior College. That's stuff
I
you
want to
learn
pull
along the
pull
way.
the string on that one a little bit more. So
Mhm.
you're you're able to get loans then without, without having put up collateral and all. In other words, you built a reputation. Was it by building a reputation over time where you have a relationship with a financial institution and you made good on that and that builds on something else and builds on something else. In other words, like what 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 what's good advice for building credibility? So you have that financial credibility to get access to the cash finances that you need.
That's really a good point. That came from experience in the industry, and they knew me. And so when I jumped out on my own, they were willing to take that risk with me. And the very first company I dealt with financed my entire business. But when I say finance, they pretty much own me.
Right.
They lock you up, they lock up your receivables, and it's important to have a good relationship. And then one of our points we had of resilience was our institution went bankrupt on us, and
Oh,
all of a sudden we're left with
that's an interesting curveball.
a lender with no ability to lend you more money. Plus the assets were purchased by a U.S. bank, and then all of a sudden we got a new boss that doesn't know us, and we had to navigate through that, but we did. And then it just was easy going forward with the reputation that we'd done the right thing and we'd paid our bills, and even when it was tough. We did.
So
And
over
now
time,
it's a little easier.
big
I'm
picture,
sorry, go ahead.
you go from being an unknown to somebody they look at and they say he's a good credit risk. And you do that with relationships over time.
Relationships are the number one thing in business I believe in.
Right.
You will be successful based on the relationships you develop, whether it be with your lenders, your employees, your customers, your competition.
Mhm.
Relationships, number one.
I think you could learn more from your competitors sometime.
But yeah,
Yeah. Um, we talked about money here. How about, sales and marketing? Well, is there anything you can recommend that an entrepreneur can do better in sales and marketing to navigate uncertainty and build resilience and, and how they market their business?
yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me over the last few years, understanding the internet side of the marketing world. I came from a different environment where you knocked on doors. And so I've learned a lot about Google and learned a lot about search engines. And, those are critical pieces of the puzzle in today's environment. Uh, Understanding how to navigate through that internet world, the social media world, the influencer world. So those are things I would tell people to focus on. The days of putting articles in the local newspaper, that doesn't work anymore. Uh, Signs on your building, yeah, but I think people now, it's all about the cell phone, as we talked about earlier, and the internet.
So the more you can leverage social media, search engine optimization, online advertising, marketing, I guess it's probably safe to say the more you can diversify across those different ways of marketing, that's the better plan you can use for the future or marketing to shore things up.
It is, and also I talk about things like brand awareness. So when you join a new franchise, they don't have the brand awareness that a seasoned franchise would have. So uh, getting that name out there, getting it through the social media out there, attending events. There's still some of that available where you shake hands and get to know people, particularly at the city council level and those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
But just getting the name out there has been really, a big challenge for people nowadays because there's so much competition in almost every industry.
So it's like the the mission in marketing hasn't changed in 1,000 years, really. It's getting your name out there, but it's what are the different ways that you can do it? What's the most effective way to have those different ways work together to build up that brand awareness?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that the days of, as I said, articles in the local newspaper just don't work. So we've spent a lot of time learning and understanding about social media marketing. It's the way to do things now.
I just have to ask. I mean, search engine optimization has been like a tidal wave, just taking everything over.
Yes.
You got any comments on SEO or search engine optimization or anything you've learned there?
No, I've learned that it's expensive. I've learned that
Yeah.
you've got to be very, very specific. And again, you're competing against everybody else that's trying to use the term grooming if you're in the dog industry. So how do you get around that and come up with different things people look for? It's a challenge. It is definitely one of the big challenges of today's market.
Yeah, I just want to pull out something really important you said, and that was the more specific you can be, the uh, the better it is for SEO. And now the next big tidal wave is artificial intelligence, and it's the same critical factor there with being specific in what you're asking AI to do. I don't even want to ask you about AI. I don't know if
That's
anything
not
is.
my thing. I'm scared to death of it right now. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah, I had a podcast last week and it's kept me up at night thinking about the things that are, that are going on there.
Yeah, that's a whole nother world for this next generation.
Well, my one big podcast question, what is one thing a podcast listener should do tomorrow morning to build more resilience and better navigate these uncertain times?
I mentioned it earlier, and I think the first thing I would do tomorrow morning is call my vendor, call my friend, call my employee, call my competition, have a cup of coffee with them, begin that relationship. If you don't do anything out of it, take anything from this, I constantly remind people it is about the relationships you build that help you navigate the hard times without any question. And so for me, it's picking up the phone and having a cup of coffee with somebody, something, somewhere.
Yeah, I like that. You don't have to actually be there physically. You can just make a call and, you know, even making, I'm doing more and more Zoom calls. How about yourself? Do you,
Yeah, I live on the Zoom without any question. Yeah, it's changed the world. Zoom has. You and I are doing it right now, and I was on
right.
one earlier today, and earlier this morning was on another one. So it's kind of changed how we have those relationships, and I think you can still have it
Mm-hmm.
on a Zoom. But I'm still a believer. Maybe it's old generation thinking, but I'm still a believer in that handshake and that us
Right.
meet for that cup of coffee if we can. And again, that doesn't just apply to your competition. It applies to your vendors. It applies even to your employees.
Yeah, maybe a way of
Just
thinking about it is, you got to get together for that meeting, that trade show, that handshake, but the time in between, keeping the relationship up with
oh yeah,
virtual and Zoom, the whole thing. But Lord.
yeah. I have people that we each have scheduled Zooms, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and
Mhm.
it's 90% of us talking about family and friends and getting caught up,
Right.
and then maybe 10% is about business.
I think that 90% is the most important.
Without any question.
James Harold Webb, we've reached the end of our resilience journey on today's podcast. Are there any other points you'd like to share?
No, I think that for me, it's assessing it, and then I talk about A, B, C, D, E, E for exit. I always think about exit before I even start a business. What's my big plan? Set the map and follow the map.
Well, James Harold Webb, thanks for joining me today on the Home Business Podcast.
Richard, thank you, sir. I appreciate it a bunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. To learn more about James Harold Webb, his book, Redneck Resilience, and his inspiring story, please visit jamesharoldwebb.com, our podcast website, for more information on guests. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and at our website, homebusinessmag.com. Subscribe to the newsletter, read the Home-Based Business Startup Guide. For more information, visit homebusinessmag.com or thehomebusinessexpo.com. I'm Richard Catmanderson saying anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great, more resilient, home-based day.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching Home Business TV.